Put on a mask today, and everyone knows what it means. You are hiding. A robber pulls one on to steal. A stranger hides behind one online. Half the planet pulled one over its face to survive a virus. Mask equals hidden. Mask equals fear. That idea is brand new. And it is almost backwards. The oldest masks we have ever found are 9,000 years old, carved from solid stone. Older than the wheel, older than writing, older than the pyramids by thousands of years. And they were not made to hide a face. They were made to erase one and put a god in its place. For most of human history, that is what a mask was for. Not to disappear, to transform, to stop being yourself and become someone else. A spirit, a hero, an ancestor, a king who would never rot. And the full story of the mask is stranger than any costume aisle lets on. It includes a word you say every single day that started life meaning nothing but a mask. A boy king buried under 10 kilograms of gold so his soul would not lose its way home. A floating city that spent months of the year with nobody knowing who anyone was. A doctor with a beak full of flowers, certain it would strain death out of the air. A soldier breathing through a rag soaked in his own urine because the air itself had been turned into a weapon. And a furious crowd who formed an anti-mask league to fight a mask order. A full century before the whole world would do it all over again. But it does not start on a battlefield or a stage. It starts in a dark cave in the desert with a face of stone that has been waiting in there for us since before the wheel. In a cave called Nahal Hemar, in the desert hills of ancient Judea, archaeologists found a human face carved from pale stone. Empty eye holes. A wide mouth set with rows of teeth. It was made around 9,000 years ago, and it looks like it is watching you. It is not alone. Over the years, about a dozen of these stone faces have come out of the same corner of the world. They are the oldest masks on Earth. And they are unsettling because they are so clearly masks. Not statues, not idols, but faces with worn holes for cords, sized to sit on a living head. Who wore them, and why? The people who made them left no writing. But archaeologists believe these were the faces of the dead. A mask shaped like a lost ancestor, worn in ritual, so that for a few minutes the dead could look out through the eyes of the living again. The grandfather speaks. The tribe listens. Picture it by firelight. A figure steps out wearing the face of someone the tribe buried a year ago, and for as long as the mask stays on, the dead are back in the room. That is not a costume. It is a kind of resurrection you can hold in your hands. This is the mask's oldest job, and it has nothing to do with hiding. It is transformation. All across the ancient world, in cultures that never once met, people landed on the very same idea. Put a carved face over your own, and you stop being you. You become the spirit, the animal, the god. A dancer in a lion mask is the lion. Think about how strange that is. A mask does not cover a person. It replaces one. And that same power was about to fill an entire theater with people using a single actor. 2,500 years ago, in Greece, the mask stepped onto a stage. Every year, the Greeks threw festivals for Dionysus, their god of wine and wild release. Those festivals grew into something the world had never seen: theater. And every actor performed behind a mask. A light, hollow face of linen or cork, with an open mouth and bold features you could read from the very back of a huge stone crowd. The masks did something clever. One actor could play a king, then a servant, then a grieving queen, just by changing the face he held up. A handful of performers could fill the stage with a whole city. The mask turned one man into a crowd, and it showed a character's entire nature in a single glance. The grinning face of comedy, the crumpled face of tragedy, the two faces we still stamp on theaters today. Here is the part that reaches into your own life. The Romans borrowed the Greek idea and gave the stage mask a Latin name, persona. It meant the mask an actor wore, but slowly the word changed. Persona came to mean the character, then the role a person plays in life and in law, and at last the human being themselves. That word, persona, is where we get our word person. Sit with that for a moment. The word for a human being began as the word for a mask. When you call someone a person, you are calling them, 3,000 years deep, a face that was put on. Our very idea of identity is named after a piece of theater. The Greeks used masks to let the living become other people. Far to the south, an older kingdom was using them to keep the dead from ever having to change at all. In 1922, in the Valley of the Kings, an archaeologist named Howard Carter broke the seal on a tomb that had lain shut for over 3,000 years. Inside, resting directly on the shoulders of a mummified boy, was the most famous mask ever made, the gold face of Tutankhamun. You already know this face. It stares out of school books and posters and the opening titles of nearly every documentary ever made about Egypt. It is probably the most recognized object to survive from the entire ancient world, and almost nobody who has looked at it knows what it was actually for. It is beautiful, and it is heavy. Around 10 kilograms of solid gold, beaten from 2 sheets and inlaid with deep blue lapis lazuli and turquoise. That is the weight of a car tire, in gold, laid over a dead teenager's face. But it was never meant to be admired in a museum. It was built to do a job. The Egyptians believed the soul survived death, but that it could lose its way and needed to find its own body again to live forever. The mask was the map home. It gave the mummy a perfect, flawless, godlike face, so the soul would recognize itself and return. Real skin would rot and vanish. A face of gold never would. Tutankhamun would keep his identity for all eternity. He was not alone in this. Far away in Rome, wealthy families kept wax masks molded from the faces of their dead. At every funeral, living actors wore those faces and walked in the procession, so the ancestors marched again among the crowd. The dead were never quite allowed to leave. So for all of that time, the mask held one strange power. It changed who you were. It could make you a spirit, an actor, or an immortal. But the very same object could do the exact opposite. It could take your face away completely and hand you the thrilling, dangerous gift of being no one at all. And there was one floating city that turned that gift into a way of life: Venice, at the height of its glory. For hundreds of years, this was the party capital of Europe, and for long stretches of the year, the law let the people of Venice go masked in public. Nobles, servants, priests, and thieves all pulled on the same white mask, the bauta, with a jutting chin that changed the wearer's voice and let them eat and drink without lifting it. And the city transformed. Behind the mask, rank simply disappeared. A duke could gamble beside a fishmonger. A servant could insult a lord. A spy could stand in a crowd and listen. When no one can see your face, the ordinary rules of who you are stop applying. The mask that once turned a man into a god now turned him into nobody in particular. And being nobody, it turns out, is intoxicating. It felt like freedom. But that same power casts a shadow, and by now you can feel it coming. If a mask means no one can pin a deed to your face, it protects far more than partygoers. The executioner pulls a hood over his head so that no one blames the man swinging the axe. A mob covers its faces before it does the thing no single person would ever admit to alone. The mask that grants freedom also grants something freedom's darker cousin needs. It lets you act without having to answer for it. That is the mask we still argue about today. The robber. The rioter. The anonymous account with no name and no face. Pure concealment, for good and for ill. If you are enjoying 9,000 years of the human face, subscribe. There is a new story like this every week. For all of that time, from the desert cave to the Venice canals, the mask had been about one thing: identity. Becoming someone, or vanishing into no one. But a new kind of enemy was on its way. An enemy that did not care in the slightest who you were behind the mask. It only cared what you breathed. And the mask was about to become a matter of life and death. In 1619, in a Paris gripped by plague, a physician named Charles Delorme designed an outfit to protect doctors from the disease. It became the most recognizable costume in history. And almost everything people believe about it is wrong. You have seen it. The long black coat, the wide-brimmed hat, and the mask. A pale bird's beak, a full foot long, with 2 small eye holes and a curved snout like a giant crow. Most people think it comes from the Middle Ages, from the Black Death. It does not. It appeared 300 years after the Black Death, in the age of Shakespeare and the telescope. And the beak was not for decoration. Doctors of the time believed plague spread through bad air. a poisonous stink they called miasma. So Delorme packed the long snout with a garden of dried flowers, herbs, and spices. The theory was simple. The doctor would breathe only air filtered through all that sweetness, and the poison would be strained out before it ever reached his lungs. In his own account, the Beak carried perfumes to hold back the foul air. It did not work. Plague does not travel on smells. It rides on fleas and on breath, and a nose stuffed with rose petals stopped exactly none of it. The plague beak was the first mask ever built to fight a disease. And it fought the wrong enemy, with the wrong weapon, for the wrong reason. But the instinct underneath it, that death can ride the air, and the right mask might hold it back, was about to be proven horribly, absolutely right. Because within 3 centuries, an army would fill the air with death on purpose. The 22nd of April, 1915. Near the town of Ypres in Belgium, soldiers in the trenches saw something they could not understand. A low, greenish-yellow cloud, drifting toward them on the evening wind, clinging to the ground. It was chlorine gas. The German army had opened nearly 6,000 steel cylinders and let 168 tons of poison roll across no man's land. A wall of gas 4 miles wide, moving at walking pace. Too wide to run around. Heavier than air, so there was no ducking under it. When it reached the line, it did what no weapon had done before. It poured into the lungs of thousands of men and drowned them where they stood, in the open air, under a clear sky. There was no wound to bind. The thing killing them was the air itself. There was almost no defense. In those first hours, the only protection a man could make was a cloth pressed over his mouth. And the fastest way to make that cloth work was to soak it in urine, because the ammonia would blunt the chlorine for a few desperate minutes. Thousands of men met the first gas attack in history breathing through a wet rag that reeked of their own bodies. It was that or choke. What came next was a race. Both sides rushed to build real masks. First crude hoods, then goggled rubber respirators with charcoal filters strapped over every soldier's face. They even fitted them, grotesquely, over the muzzles of horses and messenger dogs. By the end of the war, the gas mask was standard kit, and a trench full of men had become a row of blank, identical, insect faces. The mask had a new and terrible job now. Not to make you a god, not to hide you in a crowd, only to keep the next breath you took from being your last. And yet the deadliest thing the mask would ever have to face was not chlorine. It was not built in a factory at all. It was alive. It was invisible. It was already inside the person standing next to you. And 5 years before that cloud ever rolled over Ypres, on the other side of the world, one doctor had looked straight at it. Rewind 5 years, to 1910, and travel to the far north of China. In Manchuria, a plague had broken out that did not crawl on fleas. It spread through the air, on the coughs and breath of the dying, and it killed almost everyone it touched. A young, Cambridge-trained doctor named Lien-teh was sent north to stop it. He worked out how the disease moved, and then he did something new. He designed a simple mask of cotton and gauze, cheap enough to make by the thousand, and he insisted that doctors, nurses, patients, and ordinary people all wear it. Many laughed at him. A senior visiting doctor refused the mask completely, examined plague patients with his face bare, and was dead within days. The laughing stopped. Wu's masks helped choke off one of the deadliest outbreaks of the century, and the modern medical mask was born. 8 years later, the whole world needed it at once. The flu of 1918 killed tens of millions, and cities ordered people to cover their faces in public. And the reaction should sound very familiar. People called the masks pointless, unhealthy, an attack on their freedom. In San Francisco, they formed an anti-mask league. The newspapers branded anyone who refused a slacker, a shaming word borrowed straight from the war. A mask order, a furious backlash, a fight over duty against liberty. All of it in 1919. Then we ran the entire argument again, almost word for word, in 2020, when a virus put a mask on nearly every face on the planet at the same moment. For one strange stretch of history, most of humanity was masked together. Not to become a spirit, not to vanish into a crowd, but simply to protect one another's breath. 9,000 years, and the scrap of cloth on the human face had finally traveled the whole distance, from letting one dancer hold an entire tribe to letting an entire species look after itself. So the real question about the mask is not who carved the first one. The real question is why our species, alone among all the animals on Earth, keeps covering its own face, and why we have never once stopped. The answer comes in two halves, and the mask has always been both at the same time. Half of it is about becoming. We put on a face to stop being small and ordinary, and to turn into something larger. A god, a hero, an ancestor, a character, a whole cast of them at once. The other half is about surviving. We put on a face to stand between our soft, fragile bodies and a world that can poison the very air and fill it with killers too small to see. Become someone else, or shield what you are. Every mask ever made is one of those two prayers. It was there when a dancer let a dead grandfather speak again in a desert cave. It was there when a boy king wore a face of gold so his soul could find its way home. And it was there in 2020, on billions of faces at once, holding back something nobody could even see. Somewhere right now, a child is pressing a paper mask to their face and roaring like a tiger. Somewhere a surgeon ties one on before opening a chest. And somewhere in a museum, behind glass, a face of 9,000-year-old stone is still staring out, still waiting for a living head to wear it. All of it is the same act, the same stubborn refusal to be nothing more than one small, bare, mortal face. We built 1,000 kinds of mask to turn ourselves into someone else. In the end, every single one of them was a way of becoming more human. If you want more stories like this, subscribe. A new one lands every week. And tell me in the comments, which mask in this story surprised you the most? The spirit, the gold king, the plague beak, or the gas mask?